Have you ever wondered how a distant empire could change the lives of millions in lands it had never truly understood? How faith, identity, and power collided in deserts, mountains, and cities across the Muslim world because of one empire's ambition to rule the seas and the sands. This is not just a story of war. It's a story of voices silenced, borders drawn, and a history still echoing in the world we live in today. During the 18th and 19th centuries, the British Empire expanded rapidly, driven by a desire to control trade routes, natural resources, and political influence. This expansion brought Britain into direct contact with several powerful Muslim kingdoms and regions, especially in South Asia. One of the most significant interactions occurred through the British East India Company, which began as a trading enterprise but gradually evolved into a colonial power. As the Mughal Empire weakened, the British found opportunities to exploit internal divisions and regional rivalries. They made strategic alliances and used superior military tactics to establish control over large parts of India. Although the Mughal rulers were still nominally in power, real authority shifted to the British. The Anglo-Mysore Wars were particularly important in this context. Tipu Sultan, a Muslim ruler of Mysore, resisted British advances with fierce determination. He modernized his army, and even sought alliances with the French and the Ottoman Empire. To counter British influence, despite his efforts, Tipu was killed in battle in 1799, and Mysore fell under British control. This marked a turning point, showing how the British used both warfare and diplomacy to dominate Muslim-ruled regions. In Bengal and other parts of northern India, similar stories unfolded. Local Muslim leaders often found themselves either collaborating with or being defeated by British forces. Over time, British policies undermined traditional Islamic legal and educational systems, replacing them with Western institutions that favored colonial interests. This shift in power was not just political, it also deeply affected the religious, social, and cultural fabric of Muslim societies in the region. British control was often justified through the language of civilization and reform. But for many Muslims, it felt like the loss of identity and autonomy. The struggle for control set the stage for future resistance and calls for independence. The Anglo-Afghan Wars were a series of 3 conflicts fought between the British Empire and the Emirate of Afghanistan during the 19th and early 20th centuries. These wars were largely driven by British fears of Russian expansion into South Asia, a rivalry often referred to as the Great Game. Afghanistan, situated between British India and the Russian Empire, became a crucial buffer state. In the First Anglo-Afghan War, 1839 to 1842, the British attempted to install a friendly ruler, Shah Shuja, replacing the existing Emir, Dost Muhammad Khan. Although the British initially succeeded, they faced fierce resistance from Afghan tribes. In 1842, during a retreat from Kabul, nearly an entire British Indian force was annihilated, with only one survivor reaching safety. This defeat left a deep mark on British military history. The Second Anglo-Afghan War, 1878 to 1880, began when Britain sought to prevent a Russian mission from reaching Kabul without British knowledge. After a series of battles, a new treaty was imposed, giving Britain control over Afghan foreign affairs while allowing internal autonomy. Despite military success, the cost in lives and resources made the British cautious about further direct involvement. The Third Anglo-Afghan War occurred in 1919, when Afghanistan's new ruler, Amanullah Khan, declared full independence in foreign affairs. Britain responded militarily, but the war ended quickly, leading to the Treaty of Rawalpindi, which recognized Afghanistan's sovereignty. These wars revealed not only the military challenges of fighting in Afghanistan's harsh terrain, but also the resilience and unity of Afghan tribes in resisting foreign control. The legacy of these wars shaped Afghanistan's cautious approach to foreign powers and added to its image as a land unconquered by empire. For Britain, the repeated struggles in Afghanistan became a symbol of the limits of imperial power in the face of determined local resistance. The relationship between Britain and Egypt during the 19th century was shaped by strategic interests, especially control over the Suez Canal, which connected the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea and provided a crucial shortcut to British colonies in Asia, particularly India. Egypt, though nominally part of the Ottoman Empire, had gained significant autonomy under rulers like Muhammad Ali and his successors. In 1882, internal unrest in Egypt, led by nationalist leader Ahmed Urabi, who opposed foreign influence, and the ruling Khedive provided Britain with a reason to intervene militarily, claiming to restore order and protect European interests. British forces defeated Urabi's forces at the Battle of Tel El-Kebir and occupied Egypt. Though the occupation was initially portrayed as temporary, British control remained for decades. The British did not formally annex Egypt but maintained indirect rule, keeping the ruling Khedive in place while real power rested with British officials, particularly the Consul General. This arrangement allowed Britain to control the Suez Canal and secure its imperial interests without fully integrating Egypt into the empire. Meanwhile, Egyptian nationalists viewed British rule as a continuation of foreign domination and began organizing opposition. Britain also shared influence over Sudan with Egypt, leading to joint Anglo-Egyptian control. In Sudan, however, the situation grew more violent. In 1881, a religious leader named Muhammad Ahmad declared himself the Mahdi, or Guided One, and launched a revolt against both Egyptian and British control. His forces captured Khartoum in 1885 and killed the British general Charles Gordon. It took until 1898 for British forces under Lord Kitchener to reconquer Sudan after the Battle of Omdurman. These events demonstrated how British involvement in Muslim-majority Egypt and Sudan was both politically strategic and militarily aggressive. While British rule brought new infrastructure and administration, it also sparked nationalist and religious resistance. During World War I, the Ottoman Empire entered the conflict on the side of the Central Powers, placing it directly against Britain and its allies. The Ottomans controlled a vast territory that included many Muslim-majority regions such as Palestine, Syria, Iraq, and the Arabian Peninsula. For Britain, defeating the Ottoman Empire became essential not only for strategic control in the Middle East, but also for protecting access to India and securing oil supplies from Persia and Mesopotamia. British forces launched multiple campaigns against Ottoman territories. In Mesopotamia, British Indian troops initially suffered setbacks, but eventually captured Baghdad in 1917 after a prolonged and costly campaign. In Palestine, British General Edmund Allenby led successful operations, eventually capturing Jerusalem, a major symbolic victory. Perhaps the most famous campaign was the Arab Revolt, where Britain encouraged Arab tribes under the leadership of Sharif Hussein of Mecca to rebel against Ottoman rule. British officer T.E. Lawrence, known as Lawrence of Arabia, played a key role in coordinating guerrilla warfare and supplying the Arab fighters. In exchange, Britain promised the Arabs independence after the war. However, these promises conflicted with secret agreements Britain had already made with France in the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, which planned to divide Ottoman lands into spheres of influence. After the war, the Ottoman Empire was dismantled, and Britain gained control of Iraq and Palestine through League of Nations mandates. This post-war arrangement caused deep resentment in the Arab and Muslim world, especially when the Balfour Declaration of 1917 promised support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine, further complicating the region's future. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire and British occupation of its former territories marked a turning point in Muslim history, leading to new nationalist movements and long-term political struggles that shaped the 20th century Middle East. Throughout the various conflicts between Britain and Muslim countries, religion often played a subtle but powerful role in shaping the nature of these encounters. While many of the British military campaigns were justified through political or economic motives, such as protecting trade routes or expanding influence, the religious and cultural differences between Christian-majority Britain and Muslim societies added a deeper layer of tension and misunderstanding. In many regions, local Muslim populations viewed British intrusion not just as a political takeover, but as a threat to their faith, traditions, and way of life. British officials and missionaries often introduced Western laws, education systems, and moral codes that conflicted with Islamic institutions. In India, for example, British reforms that altered traditional Islamic law in matters like inheritance and family life sparked deep concern among Muslim scholars. In Sudan, the modest revolt was framed not only as resistance to foreign domination, but as a religious revival aimed at purifying Islam and overthrowing those seen as corrupt or un-Islamic. In Afghanistan, tribal leaders and clerics called for jihad against British forces, portraying the wars as a defense of Islamic sovereignty. These reactions weren't only about preserving political independence, but about protecting religious identity. On the British side, although some officials expressed respect for Islamic customs, others viewed Islam as backward or incompatible with modern civilization, which justified colonial control in their minds. This cultural superiority often translated into policies that marginalized Islamic institutions and promoted Western models of governance. The resulting alienation led to cycles of resistance, rebellion, and mistrust. These religious and cultural clashes did not always result in open violence, but deeply influenced how Muslim communities perceived British intentions and how they responded to colonial rule, leaving a lasting imprint on the historical memory of British-Muslim interactions across generations. The legacy of British wars with Muslim countries did not end with the withdrawal of troops or the signing of treaties. It continued in the political, social, and psychological structures that followed. The borders created by the British, especially after the fall of the Ottoman Empire, often ignored ethnic, tribal, and religious identities. This led to divisions and tensions that would later spark internal conflict, civil wars, and long-term instability in regions like Iraq, Palestine, and Sudan. The administrative systems put in place by the British were often designed to favor loyalty to colonial rule, not local unity or self-determination. This created elite classes that were disconnected from the broader population, especially in Muslim societies where traditional leadership, whether tribal, religious, or scholarly, was undermined. In South Asia, the partition of India and Pakistan in 1947 followed a legacy of British dividend rule tactics, which heightened religious tensions between Muslims and Hindus. The trauma of partition, marked by violence and mass displacement, became one of the most painful results of British withdrawal. In the Middle East, promises made during World War I, such as support for Arab independence, were broken, leading to deep resentment and mistrust. The Palestinian conflict, still unresolved today, has roots in British-era decisions like the Balfour Declaration and the Mandate System. The loss of Muslim sovereignty under British rule also fueled Islamic reform and revival movements. Some focused on peaceful education and self-strengthening, while others turned to resistance and political Islam as a means to reclaim power and identity. These responses were shaped by decades of foreign interference and perceived betrayal. For many Muslim nations, the memory of British wars and occupations remains tied to the struggle for independence, dignity, and the right to shape their own futures free from external control. The history of the wars between Britain and Muslim countries is not just a story of battles and empires, it is a story of people, of power, of identity, and of loss. It tells how ambition crossed oceans, how resistance rose from deserts and mountains, and how faith, culture, and dignity clashed with colonial dominance. These wars left behind more than broken cities and redrawn borders. They left behind deep scars in the memories of nations. They shaped how people viewed themselves, how they saw each other, and how they would move forward in a world forever changed. To understand this history is to recognize the roots of many of today's conflicts, but also to see the resilience of those who held on to their beliefs, their homes, and their hopes. And in remembering, we find the chance to listen, to learn, and to build something better.